All right, everyone. So, proof over promise, redesigning digital trust for resilient economies. Right, as digital infrastructure becomes a central pillar of economic development, emerging technologies must be inclusive, efficient, and grounded in trust, right, which is a key currency. We talk so much about currencies, but we forget the most important currency is trust. Very important. In this session, we're going to speak to Sean Coe, founder and creator of Proof of Reception, a patented edge-based validation protocol designed to enable decentralized real-time transactions verifications through human intelligence and device-level validation nodes. So, Mr. Coe, we're going to get started. What are the core advantages of POR's human-validated edge-based approach to data integrity and digital asset verification as it relates to the conversations that we've been having here today?
Thank you, Sergio, and thank you, PVBLIC. Thank you, Lawrence, for putting together an amazing event and continuing to push the envelope as it relates to impact. I think Mr. Beckman previously mentioned proof of work, and I've been involved in the Web3 space for a number of years, since 2016, and proof of work, was the original consensus mechanism adopted by Bitcoin. But because of the intense computing and energy required for proof of work, I kind of went back to the drawing board, and I think he said, don't listen to anything with PO something else, but my apologies. He hasn't heard about proof of reception yet, and look forward to talk about it more. Yeah, so just a little disclaimer there. Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to make sure I got his approval for that. But long story short, the issue with Bitcoin and proof of work, despite it, being, very secure, is it requires, as I said earlier, a lot of computing, a lot of energy, and that innately creates a lot of pollution. And we've seen over the years that Bitcoin, unfortunately, has been consolidated among a handful of owners. So the majority owners of Bitcoin are, BlackRock, Michael Saylor, and a handful of centralized beneficiaries. And unfortunately, the original vision of decentralization and spreading value across users, didn't really come to fruition. So the reason that I ended up inventing proof of reception in 2021 was to figure out a way to not only decentralize storage or decentralize value, but decentralized validation, because I believe that is the core of us creating a more equitable planet. And the reason that we have the haves and have-nots of today is because the validation of all transactions are in some shape or form controlled by a third party. And we've seen that in proof of work, where miners are kind of validating the transaction, and the miners are the ones that get all the gas fees and are able to control all the value derived in that network. What I envisioned back in 2021 and patented recently in the last couple of months is a new consensus mechanism, a new validation protocol, where we as individuals have the power to validate our own transactions. And it might seem like a very complex concept, but believe it or not, we as humans have been doing proof of reception since we were born. We see proof of reception in nature. And what does that mean? It means very simply that reception is validation. Right now, you are all receiving my words. We can call that data. And your reception is validation, because there's no third party getting in between us in your reception of my value. And it might sound very simple, but we see it in nature as well. We see photosynthesis among the plants, where they're emitting oxygen and they're receiving carbon dioxide, and that's a natural way that we're able to breathe. So after figuring out a way to really decentralize validation, I thought of ways of practically doing it, and we created our own technology stack, which has this kind of POR nomenclature, where we start off with ports, PORTS, proof of reception terminals. We are all individual ports of our humanity. Without our humanity, there would be no transaction in the world. There would be no economy. There would be no, global trillions of dollars of market caps. So what we need to realize is, first and foremost, just like an oil well is the port of that oil, at the core, or a seaport is a port that allows values to cross the sea, and an airport allows planes to cross in the air. We are each our own individual port of our unique humanity. So the proof of reception terminal, first and foremost, allows us to create a validation node for our humanity. Then we take it to the next step of a portion, P-O-R-T-I-O-N. Those are all the values that we own and that we generate. Unfortunately, in this day and age of the worldwide internet, all of our values are in some shape or form represented as data. So once we have our port and our portion, we can kind of go back to the days of bartering. Even before modern fiat currencies, our ancestors would do a one-to-one self-validation of each other's value. But fortunately now, in this day and age, we have the internet, which stores values in databases or repositories, and now we can use our ports to prove our portions at scale. And then the next step of proof of reception are the portraits, which is a smart transaction logic around our values, and that's what we started to commercialize across different use cases. And the key with proof of reception is it's the most efficient validation protocol, it's the most humane validation protocol, and allows us to kind of take ownership of the data and the profiles and all these different things that have been stolen for us since the advent of the internet. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So Sean, one of the things that I love about what Sean was just saying, and something that we at the foundation are so adamant about, it's just what we could learn from nature, right? And you look at a lot of what he was talking about is that sort of proof of reception already exists in nature, right? The infinite value and technology that we continue to create is really we're replicating what nature already does naturally. And when you look at the fungal mycelium, right, which was called the world's first World Wide Web, right? And it's been happening for millions of years. If you go to a forest, they communicate with each other. They have the internet. They are the internet, right? And it's basically some of the things that we continue to overcreate and destroy those that taught us, just so we could take advantage of it. And what I love about what you're working on with proof of reception, is basically how we can reduce that waste, unfortunately, that too many servers and so much, because we're creating, as you said, middle parties and folks in between to validate us where it's really not needed. It's just really creating a marketplace on top of a marketplace. So when we think about, and you start to sort of look ahead at POR, and you look at the future, having listened to so many absolutely brilliant conversations here today, how would you see POR serve as a technological ally for what the DBRP is doing for small islands? And I know we missed you yesterday, and thank you for flying in today. How can we look at that and build sort of sovereign digital systems? What role does POR play to align with the sort of environmental goals of everything that we're talking about here is protect Mother Nature, but yet enhance human ability? It's the old saying, right? Work smarter, not harder.
So the beauty with kind of what you had mentioned is the infrastructure for proof of reception is already there. So it's not like this generative AI dilemma where they need more energy and they need to create more power plants and all this excess waste. On average, every human has access to 6 devices, and the beauty with POR is because it's happening on the edge. By edge, I mean on your local device through these ports. Small island developing states, they don't need to invest or get sponsored a tremendous amount of capital expenditures, because all of us have a computer in our pocket, and that's our phone. And the first way that we're able to really put the ESGs first and foremost is to not create an additional carbon footprint with POR, but rather retrofit the protocol in the existing computers in our pockets, which are being thrown out every day. So there's a lot of ways to kind of reuse kind of the waste that we're creating with our newest gadgets and provide that to people who live in less fortunate circumstances. Think about something very simple. Let's say that hypothetically, I live in an island and I'm a small restaurant owner, and let's say that somewhere on the island, there's an individual who's hungry but doesn't have money to afford food. What POR does in that circumstance is, assuming that both sides have access to a device, allows the person who's hungry and in need to barter in the form of data, portion their labor to go to that restaurant, wash dishes, and then the restaurant owner can use their port to be able to figure out a sustainable way to get rid of food waste and give that food to the dishwasher in lieu of money, and also have a financial benefit of saving operating overhead. So this is at a small scale, but if this from the bottom up can scale into a new quote unquote barter economy that allows our devices to validate our own personal transactions or proof of receptions, you can see the acceleration of that to create a more sustainable planet. Now, in terms of the ESG market at large, typically they have one of two ways of validating the ESG metrics. One is geospatial data. However, from space, when you engage satellites, it's too big of a scope where they can't zoom in to individual activities. Furthermore, it's very expensive to engage these satellites and use the bandwidth therein. Furthermore, they're not always on top of a certain geographical footprint, so you have that issue because they're constantly spinning around the Earth. The second way of validating ESG data is by third-party validation, consultants or governments. However, you're kind of succumb to the human nature and the human error that's built within those validation metrics. If I'm a country, I want to make the data and statistics to make myself look good. And in order to remove those biases, we're envisioning kind of a new type of ESG on-ramp where every human, 8 billion humans, hopefully we'll get there, has a personal port, can validate, the ways that they're creating sustainable activities. Maybe they can plant a tree and they could take a picture of that. Maybe there's even an IoT sensor where there's a carbon capture technology that can capture and be able to report and monitor to the exact decimal how much carbon is being captured from the atmosphere. And instead of going to a third party, you have foolproof data proving the capturing and the mitigation of carbon. Now POR can integrate that capture of carbon, let's say it's a ton, and allow the integration. We're already integrated with over 12,000 banks around the world, where proof of reception of money, from an oil and gas company or an offsetter can now buy that carbon directly from the person that generated it. Getting rid of the third-party exchanges, consultants, and other costs, delays, and inefficiencies that have created this greenwashing and fraud in the ESG market. So those are just a handful of ways where we can play a role.
Thank you, Sean. So thank you on that. And I'm going to go into a different direction now. As you were here present with Mr. Beckman's conversation about what he's working on, right? One of the things for us with Public Foundation and everything that we do, from supporting the development of the DBRP or the Global Data Alliance that focuses on geospatial, talked about satellites, all the way across on how we look at tech transfer. What is the role that POR can play as a neutral player, right? Because to us, neutrality is key. Everybody has to be interoperable in ways to sort of advance each other's innovation to get to the, to the same goal. Right? When you look at that, obviously there's public-private partnerships and so forth, but I'd like you to as an example, as you were here listening to Mr. Beckman, is how do you look at these technologies working together? Because really that's sort of our passion when we bring everybody together. It's not about celebrating one over the other, or this is good, this is not, or this is amazing, and this is even better. It's about how we could bring the stakeholders together to build better, stronger, and fit for purpose, as we heard Gene mention earlier again, and I steal his words all the time. And but can you please kind of dive into that and put you on the spot, of course?
Yeah, of course. The way that we maintain neutrality is we're offering this technology for individual communities to customize based on their personal preferences. We've set up the Web Trinity Foundation, where our mission is to free 8 billion humans from online trafficking, because unless you're able to customize your own values and create the conditions by which you want your values to be transacted, you're at the mercy of a third party. And unfortunately, you are being trafficked by that third party. And we all know that human trafficking is bad in the real world, but online, we're being trafficked every second. And that's why I really value this human rights-based approach to data that Public Foundation and UN is championing, where from our point of view, your values, your data should be your own, and you should figure out how you want it transacted. Maybe I want my consumption data traded to Starbucks for a free cup of coffee. Maybe I want it for something else. Maybe I want, my time while I'm driving my car to be used to transport goods instead of Uber profiting, from that car. So, we're trying to bring the validation to the edge and allow the people that are using this protocol to implant their values into the protocol that they want to use for their values. The problem we have in the US, we have a two-party system, but unfortunately, not all of us fit in those two boxes, and us as an individual, we have our own perspective, and we have what's called the portraits I mentioned earlier, where now we have a new paradigm leveraging edge compute on our device to be able to customize what our preferences are into the protocol itself, and not let third parties kind of manipulate or dictate what I can do with something that I should own. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So now, as we wrap up, and again, thank you, folks like, again, you and Mr. Beckman both flew, I would say, about 4 hours or 5 hours. I think you guys took a much longer flight to be here. So we're just really thankful for innovators like Sean and Mr. Beckman there, who have made the trip here to be here with you all. So Sean, as we wrap up, kind of give us a little bit, sort of the last words. As this is really looking at nature, the DBRP. Can you give us a little bit of summary and inspiration for everyone here?
Yeah, I think we're able to give hope to small island developing states because, as I said earlier, they don't have the capital expenditures and the data centers and the power plants, fiber optic cable, and all these complications, which Sergio alluded to, the destruction that we've created with these machines to the planet. Now every one of their citizens can become a validator of their sovereign network. And then we get rid of this kind of quintessential colonialism that exists among tech companies, right? It's either Google, Meta, Amazon, or who knows who. Now the countries can have their own sovereign database. They can have sovereign freedom for their citizens to validate everything through proof of reception. And thanks to PVBLIC, now we have a framework. Now there's this development bank where we can proliferate, human freedom, not only physically, but online in the real world as well. Thank you for your proof of reception.
Nice. Nice touch. Thank you, Sean. Thank you.